Hi, and welcome to Big Boss Biscuits, the podcast where we unpack leadership stories inspired by Ted Lasso. I'm your host, Kirsten Penaloza, leadership coach and curious human who believes that the best bosses lead with a heart, with humor, and courage, just like Ted. We will pull inspiration and ideas from the show. Those moments that made us laugh, think, and maybe even cry a little. But the real magic comes from my guests and their stories. Those honest, messy, but inspiring moments that show what it means to be a human-centered leader in real life. Now, spoiler alerts, we will talk about the show and the characters. So if you haven't watched it yet, go do it now and then come back and listen to these amazing stories. For everybody else, grab your biscuits, grab a coffee, settle in, and let's talk about what it means to lead with the heart. You know how some people just bring light into the room? That kind that makes you sit up a little taller or smile a little wider? That's Dr. Jaime Leal for you. Jaime is a global speaker, author, consultant, coach, and researcher who has taught leaders in over 18 countries how to create happier and more human-centered workspaces. He's the mind behind the Emotional Paycheck method, which helps organizations understand what really matters at work: purpose, belonging, recognition, and joy. He also is the author of Modern Day Miracles, where he reminds us that miracles are not that grand gesture, but they're everyday actions of empathy, kindness, and courage. What I love about Jaime is that he brings warmth, wisdom, and a contagious belief that happiness isn't a luxury. It's how leaders actually create impact. So today we're talking about kind leadership, connection, and how purpose finds you. Jaime, I am so excited to be with you today. I've been looking forward to this conversation for almost the entire week. I am ready to dive into topics that we both are passionate about. I know we met almost 15 years ago in Mexico City working together. And since then, I've been following your path in your leadership style and your leadership development and how you teach others to be humanitarian, or what I call human-centered leaders. So welcome, Jaime. I'm really excited to kick off our conversation.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Jaime, this is also about a show that inspired me a lot in terms of just the positivity, the optimism, and the human-centered or people-centered leadership style, Ted Lasso. It's about a coach from Kansas, stereotypical, very extrovert, who coaches American football, but is hired to coach European football or soccer in London. And so it's all about the change, the adapting to new culture, being new to a team that is actually quite against him and his leadership style. And of course, like not knowing anything about the sports in this case, but also it can be a good metaphor for industry when you just get to a new team, a new company, or a new country and environment. So what has happened in your life that you can relate to this change and adapt and change management that you've been through?
Well, um, okay, so I think that change is happening way more often than we think, and change is like the only constant. I believe that was Einstein, right? And I've immigrated 3 times. I went to school in Texas. I'm Mexican. I lived in Colombia. Now I live in Canada. And every time I move to a different country, every time I start working with a different company, we face the same situation. There's some resistance to change. There are different ways of doing things, and there are lots of biases and ideas, beliefs that are thought to be true until somebody comes and challenges them. So I believe this is a muscle that we should be exercising every day, right? Like thinking about like, what do I need to change now? What do I need to do differently? Is that thing that I think to be true that may not be true anymore because circumstances have changed or the market has changed, and we see it every day. And that's, I believe, one of the biggest challenges that we have right now is that the uncertainty is king. And in the past, leaders used to be expected to know everything. So if you were in a leadership position, you were supposed to have the answer to every question. Now it's totally the opposite. Nobody knows what's happening. Nobody knows what's going to happen. So uncertainty and uncertainty management, I believe, is one of the best tools a leader must have. And nowadays, how to manage uncertainty personally and professionally and with the people around you. So, yeah, I have faced a bunch of situations like that, like cultural changes. I live in the most multicultural country in the world. Canada lives on immigration, thrives on immigration. And so, just my neighbors, one is from India, the other one is from China, the other one is from Pakistan, another one is Canadian, the other one is German, another Italian, and I'm Mexican. My wife is Venezuelan, multicultural everywhere. And even between me and my wife, we've been married for some years now, 11, and we still find differences in communication and language and words that don't mean the same, even though we speak the same language.
And so when you think about all these situations that you've been in and faced, and you translate that into the work that you do as a coach and a consultant and public speaker, what are some of the things that we can teach either senior and seasoned leaders who maybe have not been in those situations where they had to change and adapt to different cultures? And what also can we teach emerging leaders who are facing that multicultural environment, like the more immigration and movement we have of people, especially now with the whole nomadic culture after the pandemic? So, what can you share about those skills that leaders nowadays are expected to have that before maybe were not that important?
Well, we all know about these generations, right? Generation X and baby boomers and millennials, centennials, now the alpha generation or generation Z, however you want to call it. So many generations that we even struggle finding names for them. I believe the biggest power, a superpower that you must have as a leader is to be a generational immigrant. So a person who can move across different generations, right? You can talk to a baby boomer who is stuck in their ways. And of course, I'm talking about assumptions and biases based on generations. And these generations, normally baby boomers are stuck in their ways. They're difficult to change. They struggle because they were raised in a different world. And then we have Generation X, a little bit more willing to have some power, empowerment, addicted to work. They are workaholics. And then you have millennials who are born to technology. They are more nomadic. They want to work in different places. They challenge the status quo for the first time, and they say like, "This is not something I like." They are the first generation that teaches the older generation something because they were born with some technology that the other generation didn't know. And then you have the centennials who are totally digital, and they have a different way of seeing the world. A leader nowadays, since you have all of these generations sharing a space in the work environment right now, you have to talk to all of them. So you have to tailor your message depending on the audience. And I believe that's one of the biggest assets that any leader must have right now. How to connect with different generations through your speech, how to communicate your ideas. All problems are problems of communication. So all the problems that we're facing right now in the work environment come from a good intention, a good idea that was not properly communicated. So, in that sense, you have to tailor your message according to the audience. And that is something that baby boomers didn't have to do. Generation X didn't have to do. No, but now millennials must do. And centennials do it every day. So they talk to different audiences. Sometimes even going against that gut feeling that you have, like, I totally not agree with, don't agree with this, but I still will respect that person's opinion and view of the world. So I believe the biggest asset, just to summarize, is to be able to move across generations, to talk to different audiences, to just like this Ted Lasso example that you were given, right? Talk to someone in America and then talk to someone in Europe and talk to someone who plays one sport and talk to someone who practices a different sport. And that's the asset that you must have.
I love what you just shared. And it's true. I think there is beauty and wisdom in each and every single one of them. I think we all need to communicate and address all of them and connect them, and what I call connect the dots, and bring them all along on the same path of achieving a vision or a mission and finding a common purpose. And then obviously inspiring also a lot of the exiting baby boomers. Like they are now retiring and they're leaving behind some of still the Gen X generation and the millennials, but they're also Gen Z leaders that are now emerging. And so how do we mentor them? How do we help them bring them with us? And I think that's why I find Ted Lasso so inspiring, because he connects on a human level. He talks empathy and kindness. He doesn't talk technicalities. He talks about the vision of wanting everybody to be a better self, a better version of themselves. He says, quote, on the field and off the field. And I love that. And also for my own leadership with my teams, like for me, it's not about let's achieve this big money and get more clients. Like, of course, that's part of what we do the work, but it's about how can I help you become the best employee for yourself? And from there, how can I teach you skills and mentor you to become a better human being outside of work? Because when you're the best version of yourself at work and outside of work, I think we have a ripple effect.
Well, so I don't believe that much in generations. Why? Because I think they could be discriminating. So only because you were born in a certain age or time, then automatically you're assigned a set of values and principles and beliefs. So I believe that that lies like very close to any other shape or form of discrimination that could lead to some kind of discrimination within the workplace or outside, right? Only because you look old, you're stuck in your ways. Only because you're young, you're stubborn. It's why do we have these feelings? So I believe you were talking about the human contact of Ted Lasso. So that human contact has to do with the personalization, the customization of the conversation that I was talking about. Depending on the audience, depending on the person you're talking to, then you tailor your message to that person, right? You're talking to someone who is a certain way, not because they are young or they are older, they're Generation X or Y or Z. It doesn't matter. What matters is the way you see life, the way you behave, what you believe in. And then I tailor the message according to that. So that personalization is key. I believe that we live in a world of personalization, even though we have phones that look the same, right? You couldn't tell if this is an iPhone or an Android. So what happens is that all of them look the same, but once we open them, all of them are personalized. They have a different picture and applications and the information on your social media. Everything is personalized right now. So conversations, communications are expected to be the same. So that's one point that's very important, right? That's why I don't believe that much in generations, even though I teach them in the institute I work in. But at the same time, I usually tell people and I tell my students, yeah, this is a base to understand how the world has changed. But let's not assume that people only because they are at a certain age, they fall into a certain generation. That's point number one. Point number two is congruence. You were talking about like behaving on and off the field in a certain way. So that's congruence. To be congruent is way more important than to be right. Like there are some leaders I don't agree with, but they are very consistent, and I appreciate that. Yes, what I don't want to see is them saying one thing and then saying a different thing later on. Then that totally demolishes the confidence, the trust that I can have on that person. But if that person is usually the same and they always show the same set of values, whatever these values are, even if I don't agree with them, I don't mind having a good relationship with this person because now I know what to expect. I have this relative who got into a fight with each and every member of the family. But that person is always saying what she thinks. And I'm the only person from that side of the family who still has a relationship with this person. And every time we talk, I always tell this person, I appreciate that you always say what you think. And that got you into so much trouble because most people cannot handle the truth, right? And cannot handle the possibility of being wrong. But this person has said things that in another stage of my life could have hurt me. But now I see it like, oh, well, that's her view, not necessarily the truth. It's just what she's seeing. Is that correct? Maybe to an extent. She's giving me a view that she has of the world. So That's another ability, another skill that every leader must have, to understand that we all humans have different views of the world, that sometimes we're going to say things that are going to hurt others. But as long as you are consistent, I'm willing to risk that. I agree with Jordan Peterson when he says, I'm willing to risk my comfort. I'm willing to risk the possibility of being hurt just to make sure that I understand your view of the world and your point, and maybe learn from that.
Yes, and it also connects to the work that you now do. You're the founder and director of the Emotional Paycheck Institute in Canada, and you connect exactly to those values and skills and the ability to adapt to people and meet them where they are and then lifting them up from there. What have you learned? Like, I've seen you work with big companies, big corporations like Coca-Cola, Kia, Samsung, I think are some of your clients. What have you learned from that work, and what pieces of wisdom can you share with us?
Well, the company is named Emotional Paycheck, and is based on the idea that we have two different paychecks we get at work. One of them is the economic paycheck that usually attracts talent, and the other one is the emotional paycheck that keeps talent, retains talent. So we've focused on the emotional paycheck, which are all those components around the money that we make that allows us to be successful at what we do, to have some kind of commitment and engagement and be successful and have good numbers. Because we all know people who have quit a job because of their boss, or a six-figure job just because they couldn't stand stress anymore. They didn't have a work-life balance. They were losing their family or their health. So this is the emotional paycheck. The emotional paycheck has to do with balancing all the emotions that you get at work. And I'm talking about mental health, purpose in life, achieving your personal goals at the same time on a parallel path, and at the same time making some money to make ends meet. So that's the emotional paycheck. So I believe and one of the findings that we have gathered from these years is that most people are working because of an emotional paycheck, regardless of what some people may be thinking. It's like, oh no, I want money. Yes, of course, I want money too, right? I'm not against money. I'm a capitalist, right? I sell products and I add value, and according to that, I get paid. But in the other hand, there are some things I would never do for money, and there are some things I would never accept, even for all the money in the world. So that's the emotional paycheck, to find that balance. And I believe that the emotional paycheck is way more powerful than the economic paycheck. So that's, like, let's say, the biggest finding, but that can be subdivided in different learnings or takeaways. Like, one of them, now we are struggling with work-life balance. Like, that's the main number one of the 9 elements of the emotional paycheck. By the way, one of the 9 elements of the emotional paycheck has to do with money, your economic paycheck. The emotional paycheck is bigger than the economic paycheck. But regardless of what we normally think, that people work for money and they would do anything for money, that's the old fashioned way of leading people. Nowadays, we understand that that economic salary falls fourth or fifth place usually in this scale of categories. And the first one is work life balance right now. And the second one is expectations of a better future. So people nowadays are not feeling that they can balance their personal life with their work. They're working long hours. They're always connected, hyper connectivity. And that's why some of the benefits that companies are trying to offer right now, to be able to disconnect from your work environment. There are some new regulations in different countries, specifically in Europe, where you cannot contact people after a certain hour because that is considered harassment. And actually, in Ecuador, they have a new regulation right now where if you call your employees after hours, they could place a lawsuit on work harassment. And the other one is expectations of a better future. If someone is not expecting something good to happen in the future, they will not be motivated to move forward. So those are the main two emotional paychecks that we find. But there are others, right? People need to have the right tools to do their job. They need to have a good relationship with their immediate supervisor, nice work environment, culture, personal growth. I want to be able to be a better human because I work in this company. That's why we have in organizations right now what we call, let's say, school for parenting, or yoga classes, or mindfulness, or coaching sessions for personal life, or even in outplacement. We take care nowadays. Outplacement is this service where people receive some kind of coaching in the process when they are leaving the organization, and they will be looking for another job after 10 years of not being in the market, which is normally outdated, right? So you don't know anything about that. You'll be printing resumes, right? And we don't do that anymore. So with this in mind, we are taking care of the humans when they are with us and after they leave us in the organization. And I believe that's key for the emotional paycheck.
I love that. And one thing that I wanted to touch on is purpose and the why. You gave a beautiful TED Talk in Puebla, Mexico, and there was an anecdote or a story that you were telling about a time where you went as a humanitarian aid to Haiti after the devastating earthquake in 2010. And what I loved about that was the moment of reflection of like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? And why am I doing this for people that I may never see again? And I related to that because sometimes in leadership, we have the two. We have a team and we put or I put at least my heart into developing them and caring for them. It's almost like parenting. And then I move on or someone moves on. And there were moments where I questioned myself, like, why am I doing this? How do we connect to our purpose? How do we find our purpose, especially in leadership?
How to find purpose? That's a very deep question. I believe I believe that purpose finds you. You have to be exposed to different environments. And so I believe that purpose found me. And it was always there. And then one day I was able to see it. But it's not because it wasn't there before, because if I look back, is taking your words, connecting the dots, I can see that I was always like that, always in that same path. So, yes, I was a humanitarian relief volunteer for some NGOs working with the United Nations. But to get to that point, if I look back, yes, I was also a member of the Red Cross in Mexico. I was also a volunteer for the search and rescue team. I was also a diver. I was also a paramedic. I was also serving in the communications with CV radios, connecting two communities together. I was also part of a volunteer team where we were serving people some food and shelter. And so I was always there, but I never saw it as my purpose. And then one day, and I was not young anymore, so I was like over 40. And then look back, and it seems like regardless of my path, of the country I'm in, of the financial situation, I'm usually assisting other people. That purpose always gets to me. That situation there, either you think find it, or you look for it, or you unconsciously build it, but it's always there. I believe that purpose, and right now, there's like, this is not something I usually think about. Thank you for the question. Right now, I'm finding out that purpose is a matter of paying attention. Look around you and see what you do often naturally, what you gravitate towards, what you unconsciously end up doing. And that may be your purpose. So, because if I look back, if I had paid more attention when I was younger, I would have seen it. But I was like always gravitating, and then boom, ended up like that. So I was practicing Taekwondo, right? Since I was 6 years old until I was 21. So I became a black belt. Then I was teaching. So I studied English, and then I became a teacher. I studied psychology. Then I became a teacher. So it's like I always end up assisting other people in different paths of life. And business has always also been in myself. I think that I have always been an entrepreneur because I remember the first business I had, it was when I was around 6 years old. I would gather the candy from the parties. In the Mexican parties, they give you candy. So I would go and gather all the best, right, at the mazapanes, or, like the sour candies, the ones that everybody was looking for. And then I would put them together and I would sell them. And I remembered my friend Pepe, who was a neighbor. I saw him the candy that his mother bought for his birthday. You know what I mean? It's like I went to his party and I gathered this candy and I gathered candy from other parties. And then when I put them on the table and started selling them, Pepe came and he said, like, oh, I want that. And I said, how much that? Oh, 3 pesos. Okay, well, let's pay the 3 pesos. He gathered the candy, he left. And then I was thinking, like, I think I just sold him his own candy. And I was only 6 years old, right? Of course, I was not stealing. I was just gathering the resources that I had because the candies were given to me. Some of them I asked for. It's like, are you going to eat that? No. Can I have it? Yes. And I would gather my resources to have my warehouse, let's say, right, in my store of candies. So when I look back, that detecting opportunities for business has always been there. I just wasn't able to see it before. And probably I could have seen it before, and probably I could have exploited better, but it is what it is. Just like this, I have this one over here. It says, it is what it is,
I love
but
it.
it will be what you make it, right? So it is what it is, right? But I wish I could have seen it before to exploit it better. Yes. But purpose is always there. I don't believe there's a purposeless person. Purpose is there. Even the worst and most despicable people in the world history are there to show us what not to do.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
they do have a purpose.
I know, even if sometimes we see it way later when we reflect
Mhm.
back on things. I want to wrap up with one last thing. And Ted Lasso, he leads with the heart. You can tell from the beginning. There's a lot of empathy and kindness, and he gives benefits of the doubt to everybody who criticizes him, judges him, all the haters, the press, the fans, even like some of his team members. What can you tell us in terms of what you've experienced and leadership skills that you teach about finding a good balance of being a kind leader without being a pushover?
I believe it has to do with having those lines very clear in your own mind. What can you accept? What will you be willing to negotiate? And what are the non negotiable? So I was in Haiti in 2010 and I was in front of a makeshift hospital in a parking lot. So when I say hospital, we don't think about like big buildings. It was just a parking lot with some tents. And I was on the fence of this hospital, and then one person came with a machete, and he was asking for a specific medication, thinking that we may have it. I immediately asked someone to go and look for that medication, and it was like with a machete in their hand, not in their clothing, which you understand sometimes in some countries, this machete is part of their tools for work. But this person had it in their hand when they were asking the question. So it was kind of aggressive. And this person went crazy because we didn't have the medication he needed for his daughter. All the time, this person was like hitting the machete on the floor and cursing, and they were upset with what was going on. We had a conversation for a long time. It was almost an hour. And then I managed to negotiate an exchange. And I told him there are several other camps. You're going to have to stand in line in all of them to ask your question if they have that medication. And that machete is making me very nervous and scaring the kids back there. So I will exchange your machete for some time. I'm not taking it away. I'm going to give it back. But you give me the machete and I'll go personally with you to all those camps. I don't have to stand in line because I'm part of the volunteer work. I go in line inside the warehouse and I ask for that medication. If they have it, I'll give it to you. If they don't have it, then you're saving time. And then you can go look for that medication somewhere else. He agreed. He gave me the machete. We went looking for the medication. We couldn't find it. I gave the machete. He left. End of story. Next day, another person arrived. He didn't have no machete, but he was very aggressive looking for medication. We didn't have the medication. He couldn't understand we didn't have it. I tried to negotiate with him like for around 30, 40 minutes. It was totally impossible to have any kind of communication with this person. And then finally, I called the soldiers, and the soldiers came in and took this person away. One question that the doctor asked me, the doctor is a big boss of the operation, any operation. Even though some of them are not good leaders, they are still the boss of the hospital. And he mentioned, like, why did you call the soldiers on this person? and didn't call the soldiers on the machete guy. The machete guy was way more scary. And I said, well, it's simple. The machete person was angry at the situation. The second person told me, as soon as I leave this place, I'm going to grab my car and I'm going to run through your camp. The second person was angry at us.
Yeah.
So I believe that even though I'm a very nice and kind person, I do have my limits. And there are some people I don't get along with. And there are some people I try to avoid. There are some people I don't do business with because I respect myself more than I respect money.
Yeah.
Right.
Love that.
And I believe that having those boundaries clear are going to help you navigate this world. You're not going to be very popular. You're not going to have a lot of friends, but the right friends are going to come to you. You're not going to have a lot of clients, but the right clients are going to come to you because they do have the same set of values or very similar, at least. They do believe the same things and they do want the same things in the same way. I had a person who wanted to be a client. He was asking for an estimate, and then they made one comment that made me think, do I want to work with this person? That person told me like, oh, the emotional paycheck. So can I pay people only with emotions and not money? And I said like, no, that is manipulation, right? But it makes you wonder, like, what does this person want? What if I help this person and then this person takes advantage of this tool and then they use it for wrong things. So I believe like if you don't want to be a pushover, you have to stand your ground with your beliefs respectfully. And if you're clear on that, you don't even have to argue. You just leave or you abandon a relationship or you not don't negotiate some things. Respect is one of them. Like I value respect over everything. Like I do have neighbors who are totally opposite. And I get along with them because there are certain topics that we don't get into because we know we have different views. Unless you want to talk about and discuss deeply and be able to accept or to hear things that you may not agree with. So those are very clear boundaries that I have.
I love the phrase, I respect myself more than money. I think values and integrity, like having values, having those defined, and then respect yourself to live up to your own values and set those boundaries. That's one of the healthiest things I can do for myself and for others. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, your valuable experience as a coach, as a consultant, an author of multiple books, as the director, founder of the Emotional Paycheck Institute, and someone who founded the methodology and is teaching that. Jaime, it was such an amazing time chatting with you. I could continue for hours because you are an amazing human being, and I hope more people are inspired by your human-centered leadership. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kirsten.
Thank you for tuning in today. You can follow Jaime Leal on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok by finding him with his handle at Salario Emocional or find him on his website, emotionalpaycheck.com. If you like this episode, please subscribe, follow, and share.